Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Beyond Recovery. My name is Matt, and I have a very special guest. I've been looking forward to interviewing her for a few weeks now. Her name is Kari Schwear. Did I say your last name right, by the way?
Yeah, it's Kari Schwear, but close enough.
Dang.
Yeah.
And I should have covered that before we got started, but we got the first names. We were kind of going with that initially. So, Kari, how are you today?
I am good. How are you doing?
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks so much for coming on the show. Lots to talk to you about. And yeah, I really appreciate you being here. So let's get things underway. So yes, you reached out to me on there's a podcasting platform called Matchmaker.fm, and yeah, you said that you were jiving with the title of the show, and yeah, definitely caught your attention. So that's super cool.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get into your story. So you've been alcohol free since 2016, I believe is what
yes.
you said. Yeah,
August.
Beautiful.
August 15th. Oh. Yeah, just celebrated the 6-year mark, so we're cruising along now. Yeah, it gets easier I mean, it's always been fairly easy after that first couple months, but then it just gets easier and easier, and you don't even think about it anymore. It's a way of life. It's a new identity.
Exactly. Well, let's get into that. Before we do, though, let's rewind the clocks back to childhood. Like, what was your first when did alcohol first approach you in your life, and what kind of context was around that, your environment, that kind of thing?
Oh yeah, I clearly remember this. So when I was really young, like 5, 6, 7, in that age range, my parents were really active in the Porsche club. This is in St. Louis, Missouri. And we had parties quite frequently, either attending parties or at our home. And my parents loved margaritas. I mean, who doesn't love a good margarita? So it was like, hey, can I taste some of your margarita? And it was always like a cute little thing to do. But I didn't actually drink alcohol per se until I was in 6th grade-ish, about 5th or 6th grade. And I want to say it was 6th grade. I ended up having alcohol poisoning. I was at a person's house. I can't even say a friend, someone's home. And they thought it would be fun. Actually, it was for my 12th birthday. And they thought it would be fun to see if I could do 12 shots of Seagram 7. And, ironically, I never touched any dark liquor after that experience. Cause once you get sick on something like violently ill, you just don't ever touch it again. But yeah, that was my first real experience, was early on, drank all these shots of Seagram 7. And to this day, unless my mom hears this podcast interview, she thinks that it was food poisoning. My sister covered very well. I have an older sister who just told my mom, no, food poisoning, or the flu or something, was a stomach bug, whatever it was rolling around in the school. And that's what Kari has. So my mom never knew the real reason why I was so sick.
Wow. And that's, as far as still to this day has no
I think
idea.
So. Unless, like I said, she tunes in and she'll be like, I didn't know that. Although she probably suspected it at this point. I don't know.
My goodness. So that is quite the first experience as far as and then after having that experience, you have alcohol poisoning. I'm sure it was incredibly undesirable. Just terrible.
Oh, right? Yeah. Terrible. Awful.
So where did it go from there? Because some people would have just been like, oh my goodness, I will never touch any of this, regardless if it's dark, white, beer, wine, anything. I'm done. So not the case.
Oh, no. No. Yeah. Listen, I smoked my first cigarette at age 7. I was smoking like half a pack by 7th grade.
Wow.
So I was the rebel. I was truly the rebel kid. So, 7th grade again, if there was alcohol, if we were at, a quote unquote party, like who parties in 7th grade besides this girl, this is before cell phones. This is going back, I don't want to date myself, but this is like late 70s, early 1980s, this is going back way early before the internet. The internet was actually 1983 when the internet first came out. This was before the internet. And so there wasn't much to do except for hang out, drink, and smoke. So, but alcohol wasn't a big part of my life, even though it sounds like it was more about the smoking for me. I was just totally into smoking, and I laugh about it now. I no longer smoke, by the way. So there's that good news.
Where was when was the quit date for tobacco products for you?
Oh, you know what? I don't know the actual date, to be honest with you. It was about 12 years ago ish.
Okay. Good for
somewhere.
you.
It
Yeah.
was not that long ago. Considering I started super young, but I
Right.
was a closet smoker the last 10 years that I did smoke. So, I mean, we're talking like 1 to 2 cigarettes a day, but I still hung on to it for quite some time.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. And ironically, I quit I quit smoking, wait for it, because I got alcohol poisoning on New Year's Eve. And it
Wow.
was too much work and effort to go outside in the dead of winter to go light up a smoke because I didn't smoke in my house. So that's
Isn't
when
that
I decided to quit.
isn't that interesting? It's funny you mention that. There's times like I smoked tobacco for I don't know, maybe probably 8 years in my 20s, and the times I would quit were exactly that. I'd be sick, and so I'd be
Yeah.
bedridden. I'm like, I'm not gonna go outside. It's like -40 at in Edmonton, right? I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
not gonna go outside, and I just feel like crap right now. So I was just sick, and then as a result, I would like quit smoking for whatever it was, 2, 3 weeks until I decided to do it again. So isn't it funny that like something like that can like you just all you have to do is get alcohol poison, you can quit smoking
Yeah.
cigarettes. Yeah,
All you need to do is get sick on anything and you
on
pretty much,
anything,
you
right?
know, yeah, it's
Yeah,
that terrible experience and your mind attaches a meaning to it. You're like, yeah, I'm never going to do that again. So,
right, right.
yeah.
So do you safe to say, do you have an addictive personality, or was there other circumstances? Was it environment? Was it peer pressure? Like what when you can look back on it now, what do you view it as?
Yeah, well, I, you know, I feel like there was so many things going on early in my life. My parents divorced fairly young when I was
Mm,
young, and we moved around a lot. I went to 12 different schools in just 9 years.
wow.
So it was a lot of dysfunction in that aspect, a lot of unsureness, if you will. My sister was older than me, much older, almost 6 years older. So there was a disconnect. I never really had friends. So it was an unstable kind of existence that I had. And I wouldn't say, it's funny being a coach, what I do now for a living is I don't think of things as it's an addictive personality. I look at that there was many experiences that I had during that time that led me to feeling really bad about myself, about the situation that drove those actions. And as humans, that's what we do. This is why our behaviors match who we believe that we are.
Mm,
And again, going back to age 7, I declared to my mom that I would become a cigarette smoker. And it sounds ridiculous to say that out loud, but I literally stole a cigarette from her friend Gladys, who lived behind our home. And I smoked it and I really liked it, believe it or not. And I came home and I said, Mom, I'm going to be a cigarette smoker. And she was like, no, you're not. And I said, no, I really am going to be a cigarette smoker. So I had declared this identity early on and I became one. Now I didn't start smoking on a regular basis till I was 12, but nevertheless, I was a regular smoker by the age of 12. I declared that over my life, and our words have power. And there was part of being a smoker and a rebel that was exciting for me. And I
mm,
think most people that are rebels, and the true definition of that is that you're not willing to accept processes or structure. We don't like process and structure. We like to do things our own way. And I am a rebel through and through. I mean, that's who I am to a core, in a sense that I like to buck the system. And there are a lot of people that are that way. Either you're not or you are, right? And there's
right.
various degrees of that. And so I feel like taking on this identity is of, well, I'm just going to buck the system and do what I want. But a lot of that had to do with my need for attention and approval. And
Mm,
so any attention, bad or good, is still attention. And so a lot of times when you see a kid, for example, in school that's not doing well, it's not that they're not capable. It's just that they're seeking the attention. And I was a really good example of that because as a younger child going in all through high school, I was not the best student. I wasn't terrible either. I was definitely a C student. But it wasn't until I got to college then I became an A student. And it was
mm,
because my identity changed. I decided to become the person that I knew I was capable of becoming. And that's when the identity shifted, at least on my educational outlook on life. I was like, I can really do this. I am smart, and I am smart. I've been proven that. And I am a lifelong learner. I'm still learning. I'm getting certified in yet another certification because that's what you do, right? You just keep improving on yourself. So, yeah, that's how I looked at it back then.
yeah. Lots. I'm scribbling some stuff down here. I want to talk about. I definitely want to do a deep dive into just identity and what makes up an identity and and that sort of thing. We'll get back to that. First thing that actually comes to mind is when you're talking about moving around so much when you were younger. Did that develop? How did that develop your mentality as far as like, did you find yourself to be like a people pleaser when you're moving around so much and having to feel the need to fit in with a different group of kids seemingly every few months? Or did that firm up this idea of identity early on with you? Like, no, this is me.
Yeah.
Like me or love me. Like, it's up to you. Like, how did that show up for you?
Oh, it was definitely a people pleasing. So it was always about fitting in. It was always
Mm,
about trying to seek the approval. Again, that appreciation, looking for not just attention, but the appreciation, looking for the affirmations is a really good word, like, affirming that I was good enough. And, when you are younger and you are moving around so much and going to different schools, it's hard enough to fit in any school, let alone moving around consistently. And it was, of course, before social media or any of that. So that, it's really like starting all over. So there wasn't that stability. And as humans, we all crave and desire a few things. We desire to be seen, heard, loved, and appreciated.
mm,
So trying to earn that and get that wherever I went was tiring. And so I became this person who, the narrative, the story that I was telling myself at that time, the false narrative was, well, Kari, in order for you to be liked, you need to do X, Y, and Z in order to fit in. And, it's ironic. Today I had a meeting with three colleagues that I admire very much that are either in a coaching or consulting manner, just as myself. And they're all experts in their fields. And we were talking about the youth. We were talking about kids, particularly middle school, and how we might be able to help them with their mental health and addictions. And also just to understand their identity and the importance of that and getting them to dream big and to see their future self, for them to have hope. Because without hope, there is no future. And like I mentioned before, our identity drives our behaviors. So you could look at somebody and know what they believe about themselves by the actions that they take. You
mm,
can see it very clearly. You could look at somebody, for example, who's a bodybuilder, that's fit and cut and lean and has very low body fat, and they have high muscle mass. Just by looking at them, that they're doing things that take care of themselves, their body, and their fitness, right? So they're
mm,
eating clean, they're putting in the reps every day. You can tell that their identity is confidence for themselves to look good and feel good about their body, right? It
mm,
gives you an indication, it's a clue, and you can see that clearly. But that's an easy look, right? We can look at somebody and say, that's pretty easy to pick out. But what's hard to pick out is the ones that remain quiet or you're unsure. And this is where schools, for example, we're working on, like, how do we get teachers to really identify and see that there's something not quite right with this kid, like somebody who is withdrawn or something along those lines. How do we pinpoint that? How do we see that they're silently struggling or they're feeling like they're not fitting in? And a lot of this has to do with the parents as well, how they're parenting, how they're relating and communicating with their kids. And that was, I love my parents and I don't blame them for anything. I'm so blessed to have my parents. But there was things that they missed. And looking back on the situation now, I see them as individuals, not my parents. And so I
mm,
have so much grace for them. But as parents, they weren't there. They were missing a lot of signs that were clear markers, in my opinion. And I don't blame them for that. I had to go through all of that. And I look at it as such a gift and a blessing, because if I didn't experience what I experienced, I would not be sitting here today. There is no doubt. So, again, just like anybody who's in a space or an arena that they feel like they're an expert in now, it's because they walked the path. They were in the
yeah,
arena. They
yeah.
fought it. They get it.
100%. That's a great, and that's a good way to. This is one of the topics I wanted to bring up that you touched on earlier. It's like your narrative, your choice of words, right? Whereas you could have
Yeah.
remained in this victim mentality, blaming your parents for not catching these signs. In fact, now you've reframed it and you believe it. It's a belief that you have that it's like, no, they did what they could at the time, and I am lucky. I provide them grace because I'm lucky for what I've been through, and I wouldn't be the person who I am now had it not been for that. So let's get into like the importance of narratives. I know like mindset is a big part of your coaching, things of that
Mhm.
nature, and the words that we use. Like how has your inner dialogue changed over the years? Were you ever hard on yourself or derogatory towards yourself when you were younger? Are you still like, how does that show up in your life?
Oh, such a good question. And I appreciate the question so much because yes, is the dialogue still present? Slightly, yes. I don't think it's ever going to go away. I think that we all have this inner critic that likes to run the show. And did it run the majority of my show? 100%. It really did. I've gotten so much better. Am I perfect? No. Do I expect to ever be perfect? No. And I'm okay with that. I do the best that I can. I think our goal as humans is to expand and grow as humans as best we can. And that means leveling up. That means looking inward, having the awareness for where we are and being okay with it. Again, providing ourselves with that grace. But words do matter. Words are extremely intentional. And, I'll give you an example. The other day, I was talking to somebody and they were saying, this is always how it's been. I've always been this way. And I said, always, always. When you say that, like it's very infinite in a
Mm-hmm.
sense, always, because you have the ability to it not be always. So like the words that we do say, really become our truth. We manifest the things that we say. And if you ever notice this, like, I can't do it right, or, I've done that, but I failed. And you're thinking this, well, what happens is everything around you starts to orchestrate where that's going to repeat itself because that's what you're telling yourself. So if you ever know people that the same things happen to them over and over again, that's this constant, like they're always beaten down, they can't seem to catch a break. That's because they're focusing on the things that aren't working versus the things that are working. They're not looking at the gains in their life. They're looking at all the gaps, and they're looking at things that are broken versus, again, what is working, looking at the gratitude and shifting that perspective. Whether you read the Bible or any other religious type of book or anything that anybody follows, the main theme through it is when you find gratitude, you get more things. It's because you open yourself up to receive more. So what we seek, we find. So if you seek the negative, you're going to find more of the negative. If you seek the good, you're going to find more good. So that's really what it comes down to. But yeah, words tremendously have an impact on our life, period.
Love it. Yeah, a few things come up right away when you're saying this. Is like it's the classic like don't think about the pink elephant. Like when you speak in this like
Yeah.
negation, your energy goes, or like you start picturing the pink elephant, right? Or yeah, that one comes to mind first. I had another one that's gone now. But yeah, words matter, period. I love that. I want to get into there's another fascinating thing in your bio, and I'm imagining it's part of this pattern that perhaps you learned as a kid moving around so much. So you've been through 7 different career paths, which is
Yeah.
amazing. That would be terrifying for me. Like I'm just pivoting my career this past year. That was a big enough adventure. This is a big enough adventure for me. So for you to have done that 7 times, first part of the question is, do you feel that is a pattern from moving around so much as a child that kind of repeated or echoed through? And then the second part is, I guess, what possessed you to how do you know? How do you know it's time to pivot or change?
Oh gosh. Well, that is such a good question too, because I don't think anyone's ever asked me that. And I've done so many interviews. I I believe that yes, there is a pattern. I also believe that I was constantly seeking validation in what I was doing, always trying to find the purpose. I didn't have purpose. So the pivotal point wasn't when I quit drinking. That was like, yes, that was an important moment. August 15th, 2016 will always be a date that is near and dear to my heart because it was a day that I said yes to me. But it didn't change. Nothing really changed outside of me now being alcohol free. What did change is when I decided to invest into myself. And I ended up working with a coach that happened to be a physician that I once worked with when I was in the medical field, one of my careers. And I loved this particular doctor, and he became a coach, and he was coaching primarily men. And I said, "Hey, I want you to coach me." And he said, "I don't coach women." And I'm like, "I want you to coach me. You're like perfect." And so he did. And it literally is what changed my life. So many things happened during that time. When one of them is kind of his process was he would have me record a video, well, actually do it live. So we had our own private group. And he'd give me my homework and I would record it live. And I couldn't record it live. There was no way. I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. I couldn't see myself on camera. I didn't want to hear my voice. I couldn't stand the way I looked. And so I recorded it and then uploaded it. And the recording, the question that he asked me is, why are you doing this? Why are you here? What is it that you hope to gain? Which ironically is one of the very first questions I ask my clients now, right? And I remember so clearly looking back, and when I look back on this video, I feel so sorry for this girl. And 49 years old, by the way, this is how old I was at the time. I'm now 55, but I was 49. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, I don't like who I am. I don't like the person in the mirror. I'm so confused. I feel so lost. I don't love life. I want to love life. Everyone thinks that I have my life so great. Like I live in a nice house and I drive a nice car and I have 2 beautiful grown kids and I have an amazing husband. Like what could possibly be wrong with my life? Why can't I like my life? Like what is wrong with me? Why am I always searching? I can't find what I'm searching for. It was like this constant barrage of thinking and thoughts through my head. All I wanted to do was find peace. I wanted to learn to love myself. And I think there's a lot of people out there that want that same thing. And I kept searching for it all in the wrong places. And that was part of what led me to drinking in the first place. That's what led me to be that smoker at age 7. That's what led me to make the poor choices that I made over the years. Right? It was all part of that. Let me do this and then I'll be happy.
Yes.
And so we see a lot of this, when I do this, then I'll be happy. So I kept thinking, well, if I just try something different, then I'll be happy. And nothing was ever fulfilling that. The only thing that has remained constant in my life, and I'm so grateful to say this, is my marriage. I've been married 33 years to the same guy. We got married super young. I was 22. He was 20. And we're still married and still fantastic. And we just have an amazing relationship. And of course, we've had our rocky times, throughout that 33 years. We wouldn't be normal if we didn't. But it's the one thing that has remained a constant. And the reason why is because he's a constant. He's the rock. He's the stable one when I'm the chaotic one. So he brought the balance to my life, right? But I didn't have that consistency. So because I was so chaotic and I lived in a chaotic environment, I kept searching for that next best thing. So the long and short of it is, when I worked with that coach, he planted 3 seeds for me. He said, Kari, I think you're going to become a coach someday. I think you're going to have your own business. And I think you're going to share your story with the world. And I was like, no, and hell no. I was like, dude, what kind of crack do you have over there that you're smoking? Because none of that's going to happen.
Right.
Words matter.
Yeah.
Just 6 months later, there I was in church and they were starting a small group, or maybe it was a year later, they were starting a small group. And I was like, I'm going to start something at the church that is surrounded around drinking, gray area drinking. And they already had a recovery group. And I said, great, I don't want to be recovery. I'm doing gray area drinking. They poo-pooed the idea. I left the church over it. I was quite mad that day. And my girlfriend called and she said, what's going on? And I said, oh, I'm so frustrated. She said, why? And I said, because I wanted to do the small group and they won't let me do it because they already have a recovery group. She said, Kari, why are you allowing the church to dictate what you want to do? Just start something on your own. And I was like, yeah, I'll show that church. I don't need them. And that's literally how GrayTonic came to be.
Wow.
So I had no idea. And I tell you that story because the coach that I worked with at the time, David, his name is, he saw things in me that I couldn't see. And that's what a good coach will do. They can future forecast for you sometimes. They see the blind spots. He saw what I had in me. He
Mm,
knew I had the potential. He planted those 3 seeds. His words mattered
yeah.
because everything that he said has come true. And if you would have told me back then that I would be sharing my story that's out there for anybody to see, I would have told you you're crazy because that was never going to happen. I had no desire to start my own business. I didn't know even what coaching was.
Mm,
Next thing you know, I'm like, whoa, I'm actually doing this thing. Like this is going to be awesome. And I ended up becoming a life coach, certified life coach, then motivational interviewing, then NLP, all the things, right?
yeah.
Poured myself into this work in this world, and here we are 4 years later. So it's amazing. It's just amazing. So that's the power of words. Our words matter.
And it is David, you said? Dave.
David,
Shout
yeah.
out David. Yeah. It almost
Dr.
sounds like
David.
right?
Yeah.
Almost sounds like he's like a psychic or something too. He's got a crystal ball in his drawer that he hasn't shown you yet or something, right? He's like
Yeah.
predicting the future.
Well, he saw the potential, and I think that's key is that,
Yeah.
again, he saw things that I couldn't see, and I've done that for my clients where I'll you just plant seeds like I think this is going to happen. I feel this for you. And it happens. And so it's just really cool.
And what is that? Is that like a vibe that you get off the person, like the way they light up when they're talking about something? How do you identify that where you can just verbalize it back to them, reflect it back to them? Like you say, it's like a blind spot for them, but yet it lights them up and you could go, you verbalize it back to them. Like
Yeah.
how does that, what's the dynamic there?
Well, yes. So all of that. It is a reflection. There is intuition behind it, but it's also asking the right questions because what he did in those moments, I left out a critical part of that, is when we talked about that and he brought that up, it got me thinking. So even though I said no, no, and hell no, it got me thinking, what if
Sure.
I could be a coach? What if I could actually have my own business someday and work for myself? And what would happen if I did decide to tell others my story? And I got to share that the moment I did start to tell others about where I was, at least with the alcohol journey, whoa, it's like it changes everything. The moment you start to share your story is when you start to heal.
Mm.
You start to heal because if you what you don't feel, you can't heal. So it was a lot of like, let me share where I've been so I can help somebody else. And it's been that openness and that vulnerability and the authenticity, I can't say that word right now.
Authenticity?
Thank you.
Yeah.
That has opened up the doors because other people say, oh my gosh, that's how I feel too.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
they can relate. So there's this commonality and the camaraderie that happens where people are like, oh, well, gosh, if she feels that way, then I can do it too. So a lot of my coaching clients have said to me, it's because of your posts, it's because of your willingness to share. I mean, I got a story out there on a post about when I jumped into the pool with just my bra and underwear on at my friend's house because I was too drunk to put on a bathing suit, and then didn't have my clothes handy. So I just took off my wet bra and underwear to get dressed into the dry clothes, embarrassing the hell out of myself and particularly my husband. And, I put it out there publicly. I mean, I never would have thought I'd do that, but you know what? People relate to that.
Yeah.
They're like, man, I've done some stupid stuff in my life. Right. So
Right.
yeah.
100%. I say that quite a bit, like when I have guests on that are talking about their journey of sobriety or alcohol free or however they want to verbalize it. And it's 100% for me. It was like, as soon as I got into a room and was able to like something that is so shameful that I've been holding on to. And I'm just kind of like, oh, I did this. And somebody's like, that's like my Tuesday morning. Like, don't even worry about it. And then there's like this
Yeah.
laughter. The shame converts into laughter, and you have this release. And then
Yes.
it's like permission to let go of this, it's been storing and haunting me and trolling me for a while. And now it's gone just like that. So, like you say, the camaraderie. And it
Yeah.
is like it's a permission and a reflection of okay, I see my story in that person, vice versa, and that's that connection piece. So yeah, super cool story. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So
I
cool.
got plenty of those stories.
Yeah. That'd be we could do like a ten
Don't we
part
all?
podcast. Yeah. Oh hell yeah,
Yeah, don't we
absolutely,
all?
absolutely. Yeah, I have a question about just about like detachment. It's showing up a lot in my life. Like I'm still having some resistance to my letting go of my old stories, and it does come up, and I'm getting the idea of like healthy detachment, as it shows up. How is that for you? Because I'm thinking that there has to be an element of that for you to have moved so many times as a kid and changing career paths where you just you've outgrown something and you can just boom you on a do a 180 or pivot into something different, and all that energy and everything is like it's gone. Like you've replaced it. You're ready for something new. I can only imagine it's very like you got to stay present and you can't be too sentimental about like past experiences. How does that show up for you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It is, everything that I've experienced in my life, and I already stated this, I believe has happened for me. And it's that reframe of, it was the perfect setup.
Mm,
So there's kind of something that I use the four blessings of failures, or the four gifts of problem opportunities. When I teach corporate things, I say the four gifts of problem opportunities. What perceived to be a problem is really an opportunity. Another way we can look at it on a personal level is what have we discovered that we felt was a failure at the time, that we can now see that there was a tremendous blessing in disguise. And
mm,
so those four blessings are, there's always a learning there, not always, but it's one of the four, or a combo of the four. There's a learning experience that happens that we can say, wow, look at how much I learned from that I was able to do X, Y, and Z now. Like, what an amazing gift that was to be able to learn this valuable lesson. So therefore I could teach it to others, right? Because if we don't teach it to others, then we don't really know it. If we don't know it, we don't do it. So it's the
right.
opportunity to teach it. The second one is a setup. Sometimes there's a setup. We need to, be in a place where, in order to get to the next level, we have to either stumble and fall and go backwards to rise up, or it was a setup for something even better to come down the road, that we had to fall and fail in order for it to have that setup, in order for it to define the blessing for that. So that would be the second one. The third one is a redirection. And a lot of times we start off doing one thing, but then all of a sudden we realize, no, we got to turn around and go the opposite direction. Again, this sometimes can reflect back to the setup, where it might feel like we're going backwards, but there's another opportunity and another path that we didn't even know existed. And so there's always been a redirect. Like, I mean, just to give you a quick example, is the home I currently live in, which we built this home 11 years ago. I found another house that I wanted, and I had my heart's desire on this other house, and it didn't pan out. And we had to wait 6 months. And we found this property, and we ended up building this home, which is our beautiful home that we live in now. But if I didn't go through that process of this redirection, it was something better waiting for me. I looked at it as like a failure because we weren't able to get this house, when here this was, even something better was waiting for me. So sometimes there's a redirection in what we think is a failure, right? And the last one is a reflection. And a reflection is the hardest one to look at as far as a gift, because a lot of times it's holding up the mirror and looking at ourselves and really capturing how much we've grown, and seeing our vulnerable sides, and seeing the rawness that exists, and being willing to share that. And I think for me, that has been my gift, is that I am so open. I am always willing to be vulnerable and share where I've been. And I think that makes me who I am. That makes me truly authentic, which connects with people, because I'm willing to get in the ditches with you. I'm willing to rise with you, and I'm willing to go backwards with you. And I
Mm,
think that's the beautiful thing about having a coach, is they're walking alongside of you. They're not there to pull you along. They're not there to push you along. They're there to walk alongside of you, which is different. So it's a beautiful co-creative relationship. And I had to do that for myself until I worked with that first coach. And I've had a coach ever since, whether it's a business coach, a specialty coach, or a one-on-one coach, a personal coach. I think coaching is very important because we cannot see our own blind spots.
Mm.
We just can't.
That's the nature of the blind spot, right? The shadow work. It's
Yeah.
in the
The
shadow somewhere back
shadows,
there, right?
100%.
Yeah. So let's get into identity's been kind of a loose theme throughout our conversation here. So I want to when you have somebody that's I went through this a couple of years ago where I was like, I remember one of my counselors had asked me, she's like, what are your core values? I'm like, oh, that's easy. And then it wasn't quite so easy. I wrote some words down and I was like, these aren't really resonating with me. Like I thought they were what I was supposed to write. You know what I mean? And then I was okay, so is this what I'm thinking other people want my values to be? And I'm like, no, some of these are like my dad's values. They're like learned values. And I'm like, man, I don't think I've ever like wrote down my own values. And so that led me into this like 18-month journey of trying on different ones and seeing which ones I was embodying, and you know what I mean, like just so that sort of thing. So that has been a big part of me. And like I'm 40, like I turned 40 last summer. So what is that like when you have some people coming up and you're telling them, okay, your behaviors match, or what was the way you worded it?
Yeah.
Behaviors match who you think you are, and it's your identities. But if they aren't
Yes.
really sure, how do you navigate that?
Well, I mean, it's clear what they believe they are. So I'll give you an example.
Mm.
I'm working with a client now who, when she hired me specifically to help her with her drinking. Not everybody does. I'm an executive lifestyle coach, so I work with executives and leaders and so forth, and they can hire me for a number of reasons. It could be personal, business, whatever. But this particular gal definitely wanted to focus on her drinking, and she said right out of the gate, "I don't know if this is going to work." And so she
Ah.
allowed herself this 2% gap. There's this rule that I talk about, the 100% versus 98%. If you're not 100% committed and you're only 98%, what you're doing is you're leaving this 2% backdoor gap of an excuse open so you can slither out and be okay with the fact that you couldn't do it because you gave yourself that 2% out. But what happened in her statement was saying, I don't think I can do it, or I'm not sure it's going to work, is that she's already claimed her identity that she's a failure
Mm.
and that she can't do it. And we are at our 3-month time frame, and I work with clients for 6 months, and she's like just now starting to say, okay, I think I can say that I'm a non-drinker, because part of that identity shift will match her behavior. So she has gotten herself in a good place with her alcohol consumption, but it took her a little bit longer than some other people because she was not willing to give up that identity that she was a drinker. So her heart's desire and her wish were not matching. So her, another kind of a joke is you can have a wishbone all you want. Like I wish, but it takes a backbone, not a wishbone, to get what you
Ah.
want. So she was wishing that she could stop drinking and be a non-drinker, but she wasn't claiming that she actually could be or desired to be. She was leaving this back door open. So her behaviors, therefore, were following what she believed she was. So now she's starting to shift. Now she's starting to say, you know what? I've proven to myself, I'm, 3 weeks in, I'm a non-drinker.
Mm.
I'm now a non-drinker. And she's starting to believe that that is possible and that's true. And so the moment somebody clicks and dials into that, their behaviors start to change because their identity's changing. So if you look at somebody too that's, a marathon runner, for example, they know that they are a marathon runner. I might be able to run a half a mile, but I'm not going to say that I'm a marathon runner because I'm not. That's just not, and nor do I want to be. But if I wanted to be a marathon runner, then I would say, you know what does a marathon runner need to do? What does that look like? Well, they eat a certain way, they train every day, they have 1 day of rest. Like, what does a marathon runner actually look like? What do they do in order to become a marathon runner? So whatever your identity is or who you want to be, you have to align your actions every day to match that. So you actually then become it. And it happens simultaneously if you do it just the way I said. Like if you declare it, own it, and then start to implement the actions to actually do it.
Sure, for sure. So, there's the thing that comes to my mind is the whole like, yeah, and I've never been a big fan of the phrase. I understand it, but like the whole fake it till you make it. So if you're,
Yeah.
is that like a form of declaration? Because to me, when I hear fake it till you make it, there is that 2% within that phrasing. Because fake it to me is a 2% almost, right? Or it's like, so how do you resolve that if somebody, doesn't quite see that in themselves? So there is a 2%, regardless of, like they want to. I guess
Yeah.
that's where it falls into that wishing category, and that's where the coach is there to help, build that foundation for them. But yeah, it's tricky, right? Because there
It
is,
is tricky. So
yeah,
there is something about the fake it till you make it, but fake it till you actually believe it, or say it
mm,
till you believe it. But
say it to believe
with
it.
affirmations, I am a believer of affirmations. I think that there's something to be said when you say something over enough times, you're actually going to start to believe it. But what happens with affirmations for a lot of people is their brain automatically, their unconscious mind says, "Oh, that's complete BS. That's never going to happen." you know and then so when we cast this doubt upon ourselves, then that then becomes a reality. So we can have this vision, aligning how you feel. This is where the 2 millimeter distinction comes in, is when we align with what it is that we truly want in our life. We have to think ahead, right? Like, who is the person we want to become if you're not that person? And we see that and we feel it. We have to really feel it. Joe Dispenza, if you're familiar with this work, he talks
Hmm.
about this. It's like a signature on your nervous system. It's like stamping it on there. Like, this is who I want to become, a non-drinker, for example. Or I want to be, for me, I want to be a TEDx speaker, and I want to be on stages, big stages, speaking in front of 10,000 people. And if I just say I'm an amazing speaker, you know, my, rationally, my brain's going to go, you're a speaker, but you're not that kind of speaker yet. So if I want to be this ultimate speaker that's speaking in front of 10 to 20,000 people, what does future Kari as a 10,000, speaking in front of 10,000 people, what is she doing in that future version of herself? How is she showing up and how does she feel about it? And I need to embody that now, because our brain doesn't know the difference between what is imaginary and what is real. So if we can train our brains to look into the future and feel what that feels like for us, and we can start to see that in our mind, then we start to orchestrate those thoughts and our actions follow. So a lot of it, it's not really so much fake it until you make it as it is to say it, believe it, and then you end up doing it. But you have to
Mm,
feel it. So, the cognitive behavioral model talks a lot about, and so many coaches talk about this, and I do as well in my work, is that our thoughts will always drive a feeling or create a feeling for us. And those feelings is what drives action. Some people call it the think,
cool.
feel, act cycle. I call it the circular thinking loop, and I add more layers to it, that, those thoughts are stemming from a belief or a circumstance. And from that, we have the thought creates the feeling drives an action or inaction, which produces a result, which reinforces the belief. So we have the circular thinking loop that happens in our head, and that is human behavior. So if we can actually think it and feel it before it happens, then we can start to align the actions, and then it becomes true. And then we see the result. And the result is we actually become the person that we want to become. So we can use that same think, feel, act, or the thoughts, feelings, action model, whatever you want to refer to it as. We can start to use this to our benefit. And this is neuroplasticity, by the way. When we started talking about neuroscience years ago, we didn't understand how much the brain works, how malleable it can be, and how we have the ability to rewire our thought patterns. So all the stories that we've told ourselves when we were younger, like that inner critic that's been running the show, like I like to say, that's been running the show, we can train that inner critic and that mind to shut up. I heard a podcast interview with Ed Milet recently with
Mm,
I forgot. I love Ed. By the way, I'll
yeah.
be a guest on his show
Oh, that's
in the
incredible.
future. And
Wow.
future Carrie will be on Ed Milet's
There
show,
we
just so
go.
you know,
Amazing.
right?
Yeah, putting that
Yes,
out there right now.
I feel it like I'm
Love it.
there with him now, right?
It's amazing.
Anyways, I forget the gentleman's name. I want to say, oh, I'm gonna bomb it. I think it was Tom. oh, I forget what it was, but it was such a good interview. And he talked about when we have thoughts that really are playing in our head and they don't serve us, because we all have thoughts that don't serve us. He explained it as to put them into a shredder. Like, pretend you're taking these thoughts and running them through a shredder and you're
Mm,
getting rid of them. When I think about that, if you think about that, like, you're telling yourself the same story, like, oh my God, somebody's mad at me and I didn't do this right. Or like you're
yeah.
moving into that spirally state. If you're just like, wait a minute, stop, pause, reflect, ask yourself, is this really true? Is this serving me? If it's not, you put those thoughts through the shredder
Yeah, yeah. That's rad.
and then they're gone. And
Yeah,
then they're gone.
super cool. And that,
Next. Yeah.
right?
Then you
And
just say next.
next, and then I'm sure something else comes up very quickly.
Yeah.
So, that when you're talking, so think, feel, act, the thinking part that's why it's so important, again, to circle back to why words matter so much, because the thinking, the
Yeah.
quality of your thoughts will be the quality of your feelings. The quality of your feelings will be, direct your whatever actions you're taking, right?
Yeah.
So just to circle back to that, how important that is. That's really cool. I love how you frame that. Yeah, so I know that as we talked about before we started the interview, that you have the question the drink movement. You're
Yes.
kind of in this transition, right? Because you're
Yeah.
you're going moving, you're coming out of like this phase of carries, and you're expanding into this new one. So I want to give you a
It's
chance
gonna
to
be on, but that's gonna be on
get
Ed
me on
Milet's
Ed
podcast.
Milet show, right? Right. Another one I really enjoy too. I'm not sure. Do you watch Impact Theory with Tom
Oh
Bilyeu?
my gosh, that's the other.
Oh,
Listen, the measure of success is when I'm on with
hell
Tom
yeah.
and on with Ed, of
Oh,
course. Yes.
I can't wait to
Love
see
them
you.
both.
I'm looking forward
Thank you.
to seeing you on that, and I'll put
Thank
that
you.
out there as well. Yeah, those are
Yes.
my two top
Ex-
podcasts for sure. So, yeah, where are we going with? Oh,
Oh,
yeah, no,
question the drink. Yeah.
yeah, yes, yeah, and yeah, that threw me off. Sorry. Yeah. So the last, oh yes, the question, the drink thing, yes, and now you're expanding into your next stage. So I want to give you an opportunity just to, yeah, just verbalize, where you're going with it, and
Yeah.
as well as like if what you're saying here is resonating with folks, where can they find you online?
Yeah, definitely. Well, my website is graytonic.com with an A, Gray. Listen, in America, I have to say this. In the United States, we spell gray, Gray. Everywhere else in the world, it's like Fahrenheit and
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Celsius. We're
Right.
the only ones that got it wrong,
Yeah. Yeah.
apparently. But it's Gray tonic. Graytonic.com. And then my other website is actually grayareadrinking.com. And on that website, again, Gray, is a quiz that somebody could take to see if they are a gray area drinker versus somebody who's severely abusing it. And it's a good way just to see, and that will lead them eventually to, if they want to join Question the Drink for 30, which is a 30-day, it's meant to be a 30-day course they can do on their own. About twice a year, I run live groups for that. Most likely will be dry July for January, and again in July I do that. So January and July, and those are live groups. But other than that, you can go through it on your own, and it's an amazing program. We start with the most important foundational piece, which is, again, why are you here? Why do you want to do this? Your why has to be of deep value. And then knowing the difference between intention and a goal. I focus so much on intentions with my clients so they understand, like, your intention is the micro wins that get you to the bigger lofty goals. But if we
Mm,
don't take one day at a time, this is where AA gets it so right. It's like, it's one day at a time, right?
mm,
So what are those daily intentions that are getting you to the next step? So I talk about intentions versus goals. Having a commitment to yourself is so huge. Implementing new daily habits is also ginormous. It's like, now that you're not doing this, you need to fill your time, and you need to do it by really edifying yourself and pouring into yourself in a massive way. And this can feel selfish for some people, because now I really inspire them to take time in the morning to set that time aside and make it your own. Filling your own cup, putting on your daily armor is what I refer to it as. You're putting on armor every day so things bounce off you like Teflon. So you
mm.
are learning to respond and not react. So those are things that are really important to me. And they go through this program. So I do have a Facebook group. I'm thinking about phasing that out now that I'm officially saying that out loud, but I think the Facebook group might be phasing out, but the actual course will remain and may expand and become something bigger, but right now it is evergreen. So anybody can jump in at any time. So yeah.
Rad.
Yeah.
Super cool.
And I will say about this too, the question the drink has always been about, listen, if you're questioning your relationship with alcohol, it's about questioning the drink. Like, is it serving you? Is it not serving you? I've never been one to say, hey, you have to quit drinking. That's for you to decide. Right. So it's always been this empowerment statement of just question it and then go through the program and then make the best decision for yourself. And most people find, wow, alcohol does not serve me. Now, if they're not a gray area drinker and they're severely abusing, that's a different story. Then they have not only a psychological addiction, which we all do with addictions, but they have the physical component that they can't live without alcohol. That's a different story. The program's not for somebody who's severely abusing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Good to clarify that at the end as well. And as we wrap things up, I'll have everything in the show notes as well for where folks can find you. I always like to ask this question at the very end. What
Yeah.
does authenticity mean to you? What does being authentic mean to you? And how do you know that you are acting authentic?
Oh, definitely is the vulnerability part, and just showing up and I work with this other coach. We're on a leadership team together and I love the phrase that he uses. It's shattering the glittering image, just shattering this outward, you know, persona that we can put on and just showing up authentically for ourselves. But it begins with yourself because we have these different avatars, like, if we show up in a work meeting and we have to be a certain person versus who are we at home, and to be authentic all the time and be that person is really key. And I like to believe that I'm that person. Do I have an ugly side at times? Of course we all do. We're human. We all have emotions and we have to honor those emotions, but showing up and just being vulnerable is a big piece of that. Being willing to share what's on your heart is huge.
Yeah, that's good. I like what you're saying though. Like you mentioned, it's like, yeah, if you're going to a work meeting or something, like I had a discussion with somebody on a different podcast where he was talking about, yes, you have different identities and that's okay. You have like I'd have parent Matt, I'd have like work Matt and all that. And I had a hard time with that initially. I'm like, well, how can you be authentic if you have these different personas? But to a degree, I mean, obviously I'm going to act differently, in a work meeting than I am at home. But at the same token, I got to find some like, thread that goes through it, that connects it, that is me being vulnerable or authentic as best to my abilities. So that was the part that I've had the hardest like time like resolving is like,
Yeah.
right, is like the no need for persona. Right. I
Yeah.
still have things that are very much as soon as I get around a certain type of personality, my persona comes up. Right. So I think it's just an ongoing work in progress, like as we all are, right?
Always,
Yeah,
yes, it's never done, never done.
yeah.
And I'll end with this. Ed Milet talks about this, and Matthew McConaughey brought this up in the Oscar speech about chasing his hero, always chasing the version of himself 10 years later. And Ed Milet talks about this too, that when he dies and goes to heaven, he imagined he's standing there with his, what he perceived as like a twin of him, and God says, you've lived up to this person that I've created you to be, and striving for that. And so I think if we all lived our life that way, like truly living up to our potential, what we can really truly give. And a lot of that does mean we show up for others. When we are operating at the highest level of ourselves, that is being authentic too, because we're able to give freely without expectations or reciprocity or anything in back and reward. We just are doing it because we want to. So I think there's a piece of that as well that's important.
Yeah, excellent. Awesome stuff here today, Kari. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's been so much fun. I really appreciate it.
Awesome.